guys, welcome back to my channel. I am so glad to be back with another video. Just a trigger warning before we get into this video. I'll be talking about my mental health experience, so it will include words like rape, it will include words like suicide, it will include words like anxiety, depression, therapy. If any of that type of lingo does trigger you, this is me just warning you so that you are aware of what to expect within this video. So let's get into it. Let's talk about mental health, my mental health, and where we are now. So basically, I think for a lot of us that have battled with their mental health has simply, for me, let me speak for myself. For me, I've battled with my mental health for the longest time partly because of my childhood trauma, and then also some of the things that I experienced in my adulthood, some that I put myself through without really being cognizant, and some that I have been put through by others. We're not here to blame anyone. I think that I'm 25, I can take responsibility for a lot of the actions that have happened in my adulthood. My childhood trauma, let's speak about that. When I was a child, I was sexually molested and raped. And when those two things happened as a child, I always felt like this is my fault. These things happened to me because I ndimo wrong. I always just felt like that. I always just had that thought pattern. I never really talked to anyone about it because I always just felt like I was the only child that went through that experience. Then when I grew older and began to just understand the nuances of life, this one day, I was home alone after school and I was watching the Oprah show. I tell the story so many times. I was watching the Oprah show. And on it was the Ricky Lake or Oprah show. I can't remember which show it was. Was it Ricky Lake or Oprah? It was probably both, because I remember Ricky Lake having this conversation and Oprah as well. But anyway, I was watching either show and they were talking. They had people who had sexually molested children and they had victims as well, or survivors rather. And Oprah, I think it was Oprah, I'm really convinced it was. Oprah was like, she didn't tell anyone about her being sexually molested because she always thought it was her fault. I was like 15 years old or 14 years old at that point, somewhere there, just beginning of my teens. When Oprah then said that, I then was like, oh my word, my jaw dropped, because for the first time in my, young years of living, I can hear and see someone who had been through what I had been through, and they get it. And all the sexual predators they were speaking, and they were saying, they were like, they basically explaining the reasons why they did what they did. But what stood out to me is that Oprah spoke about how she felt that it was her fault. And that when she realized that it wasn't her fault, it was like a whole 180 in her mind. That day when I finished watching that episode of the Oprah show, it was a full 180 in my mind as well. Because for most of my life, I was living with this guilt that, oh my gosh, imagine at 14 years old thinking that at 4 you were too sexy. That's what happened to you. Like, that was my thinking. Oh, I was too sexy. I developed quickly. I started my period early. Like, as a child, like, that's what I thought. Like, can you hear? Can you hear? So, when I watched the Oprah show, I feel like that kind of saved me because the guilt stopped. Then the anger began. So it was like flipping the coin. We went from, this is my fault, I'm ashamed. Oh, just that like constant fear that I'm not a virgin, then I'm not worthy, blah, blah, blah. Someone took it from me. My innocence is gone, so I'm not innocent. Like, I constantly just always grew up feeling like I am not a proper girl because that had happened to me. Even when I would play with my friends and we'd play mommy and daddy, I was always like, she's like the more masculine female, if you will. And I was like, I want to be dainty. Yes, I'm tall, but I want to be dainty, And I know like these are just like little things, but now that I'm older, they matter to me. Like, they really do. Like, as a child, I didn't want to play the husband. I didn't want to play the boyfriend. Like, I wanted to be also the wife. I also wanted to be the cute Barbie girl. Like, you know what I mean? I also wanted to be small and petite and cute. And I feel like when I realized what had happened to me, that was taken from me. Like, my innocence, my yeah, it's a long story. My therapist has heard it all. So with that, then growing up and understanding what had happened to me, and my perspective on sex even just changing completely, my perspective on men, it took me a long time to trust the men in my family, my dad, anybody. I didn't, not that they did anything, those that did that, they know what they did, but I guess the other people that didn't do anything, I took a long time to trust them, because I always just wondered, if is it a matter of time until they violate me in some way. So there was just a lot of nuance, like in my approach to men, my just my life, like towards men, and my perspective was very tainted. Anyway, fast forward to now my adulthood and beginning therapy, making the decision to begin therapy. I prayed about it and I was like, I really want the opportunity to sit down with a professional and have them help me piece my thoughts together, because my perspective on sex, my perspective on men, took a long time to get correct. It took a long time for me to view men as just people that are not out to harm me. So this year, March, I began therapy. And before therapy began, I was at my lowest of lows. Like, I'd never been that low in my life. I'd never felt ashamed. I'd never felt more. Essentially, the feeling that I had, and the overarching feeling that I had, was that I don't want to be here anymore. Life had got too exhausting for me, and I just didn't care. I didn't care whether I lived, whether I didn't care. I just didn't want to live. I just wanted to be alone, and non-existent, to be quite real. And I know that in the comments, you guys might want to comfort me and be like, oh, it's going to be okay. I implore you, don't do that. Sometimes it's just good to hear someone and not advise them. Sometimes it's just good to be like, I hear you and I see you, and that's that. So I began therapy and I hated it, because in the beginning, because I thought that, I don't know what I thought. I think it wasn't what I expected, because so I have a huge love for psychology. I have a huge love for anything therapy kind wise. So when I began therapy, I thought everything that I'd watched on YouTube, every movie that I'd seen about psychology and therapy would be what I experienced. And I also didn't realize how honest I'd have to be about my thoughts. Like, my therapist knows how I feel about everyone in my life, no filter, and being that honest, being that vulnerable, it's a scary thought. But I found healing in that. I found healing in knowing that I have a place where I'm listened to without someone wanting to, try and put me in my place or try to belittle me. I have a place where it's safe. I have a place where I'm checked for my bad habits, but I have a place. Mental health in the Black community. I know that in the Black community, a lot of us don't know how to deal with people that aren't well mentally. For instance, if someone is struggling with depression, if someone is struggling with anxiety, we don't know how to help them. And I feel like we would be lying if we said we did. And I know that some of you might say, well, I can pray for you. I can do 1, 2, 3. That is good and well. But I feel like sometimes when someone comes to you and says, hey, I'm struggling with depression, for you to just be like, hey, I'll pray for you, and then expect that person to automatically for that depression to lift, I feel like is a bit unfair. Because sometimes what I'm asking for when I tell you something like that is for you to hear me, is for you to see me, is for you to roll in the mud with me. And in my experience with mental health, there have been very few people that are willing to go through it with you like that. Which is sad, but then again, mental health is a heavy burden for a lot of people. So I don't mental health illness rather is a heavy burden for a lot of people to carry. So I obviously wouldn't expect everyone to be like, oh, so I get that. But at the same time, I feel like let's not be dismissive in our response to people's mental health issues. I also get the narrative specifically within the Christian environment to say, oh, I've been healed from it. You can be healed from it too. It's easy to say that, but not everyone with depression has depression because they don't have money in their bank account. Someone could be depressed because they're living with their abuser. So if you're about to say something about depression and how it can be taken away and how you can be healed from it, listen. I implore you, listen. Before you say anything, before you share your experience about how you have overcome it, about how it's no longer an issue for you, listen. Also, the notion that people who are depressed choose to be. I laugh because there has never been a day in my life where I woke up in the morning and I said, I choose to feel like crap. There has never. So before you say to people that depression spelled backwards is something else, or if you remove the D, or if you add a, please, come on, don't give us acronyms for like, Aibo, Njani. Do you think that if we have, like, we just put acronyms for how you can heal depression, that I wouldn't then be in therapy? I'm just saying. People are not saying that they're depressed because their car broke down. Some people are depressed because they've never met their fathers and their fathers didn't want them. Some people are depressed, like I said, because they're living with their abusers. So before you try to give people solutions as to how they can overcome it, listen. Listen, it upsets me a lot. It's something that I'm very passionate about, how we lack compassion towards people that are struggling with their mental health illnesses. The moment someone says they're struggling with anxiety, we want to be like, oh, don't think about that. Positive thoughts. You think you think that someone that is really battling to piece their thoughts together, they are really just battling, that they should just be like, positive thought. This is not Peter Pan. This is someone's life. So I implore you guys, before you want to respond to someone's tweet and say, oh, you just need, no, listen. When people say that baya gowisha, they are really gowishing. It's not jokes. And I know that we joke about it on Twitter, on Facebook, and all these platforms. Because listen, I laugh as medicine, honestly, sometimes. But listen. Even from the Christian worldview, you might want to, give someone a scripture. Before you do that, have you listened? Have you heard them? Have you seen them? Don't just throw bandages over things because it makes you uncomfortable. Don't do that. Listen to people. Roll in the mud with them first. Then, I hate that we are face value people. I hate that. This is me just venting, I guess. I hate that we're face value people. That, oh, I'll pray for you. You're in my thoughts. I hate that about our society these days. There's no real value in our interactions anymore. But anyway, all I'm saying is that I feel like sometimes mental health within the Black community is pushed under the rug. And I guess it's because the mechanisms to deal with it are so expensive. For someone to be on medication and they don't have medical aid, that's expensive. For someone to have to go to therapy every 2 weeks, that's expensive if you don't have medical aid in South Africa. And you might find that the systems that we have in place for free therapy you have to wait in a long line for you to get a therapist. And when you eventually reach that therapist, they have 50 clients that they're catering to because our system isn't the best when it comes to looking after our mental health. Then you're still suffering. So let's be kind to one another. Let's exercise grace. Let's lend an ear before we even advise, before we throw anything at people. before we even throw solutions, listen first. And I know it's tempting to, if you feel you've healed from something, to want to get others to heal the same way that you've healed. I get it. I've been there where before I went to therapy, before I even knew that, hey, Zoshuba, I thought that, no man, just pray. And prayer is great. I recommend highly. But don't be that person when someone says, yo, I couldn't sleep last night. And you're like, just pray. How about, why couldn't you sleep? How can I be there for you as your friend? Do you need me to call you at 3 to check if you are asleep? How can I be of support to you in this time? How about that first? How about that? Anyway, y'all, I just wanted to tell you guys all about that I had in my mind about mental health in our Black community, and just mentioning some of the stereotypes that I've seen. Not stereotypes, but I guess stereotypes, if you will. I think the one that I hate the most is the assumption that people who have mental health issues are either pretending or that they somehow brought it onto themselves. This is also my thought, is that people are not just depressed over like the fact that they don't have money. Some are depressed maybe because they have a terminal illness, and for you to now put a bandage over that and be like, no, just have positive thoughts. Yeah, it irks me so much when I see it on social media all the time, when we just disregard people's experiences, disregard people's what they're going through because we think that we have the solution. When it comes to things like mental health, you might have the solution, great for you, but sometimes all people need is an ear and not your solution. So sometimes the solution is an ear, because I can tell you for me that my healing also came from being seen and heard. Like for me, that's where it also started. Like, okay, I'm being seen, I'm being heard. Like that was new to me. Oh, wow. And then from that, the other things then began to come out, and the healing process is still continuing. That is all I had to say. Let us not babble on. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please share your experiences down below with your mental health issues or anything really regarding mental health. Let's lend an ear. Thank you. Bye.